Hey everybody, so this is going to be part one of a multi-part transgender related FAQ. I've compiled about 40 questions, that was a cattail, from the sort of the people who sent in their questions via the comments that were below the video. If you sent in a cosplay related question, this was a transgender sort of that side of things related FAQ. I will be doing a cosplay one or a cosplay oriented one eventually, but I decided to split up the two just because I don't think the two have anything to do with each other. So yeah, this is just gonna be cosplay related. I just got back from the gym, so I look like, I don't know, sweaty crap. I don't know, but I just figured I'd do this now while I am focused on it because I've been thinking about it all morning. So, question one on my list is cost and coverage, and obviously this depends on where you live, what you're getting done, what you want done, what your plans are. If you're in the US, are you on Medicare, are you on Medicaid, whatever. I'm not too familiar with the cost issues in the US, I just know it is different than Canada because here we have universal health care, which means that when I go to the doctor, I don't have to pay, which probably over time will make a great deal of difference. One major misconception people have is that I live in Canada, therefore my transition is free. That's not true. I have paid over $10,000 so far, and most of that is cost of surgery, in that I had my initial surgery, which was $7,000, and then I opted to have a revision, which was another $3,000, because I more or less needed it to happen because I have sort of discomfort, weirdness on one side. So yeah, obviously a great deal of money, and you can get surgery covered in Canada. However, there are restrictions to this in that you cannot choose your own surgeon. I considered having my surgery covered, however, I wanted to choose my own surgeon. I also want it done within a certain time frame, and I also had the money. I had access to that money. My cat's in the corner. I also had access to that money. So, yeah, I decided that I would go the route of paying for it privately. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with going either route. I just know that when I was in the MSP program for the period of time that I applied with all my documents, and then it took 4 months until I had an appointment with, because you have to pass a psychological evaluation. It was 4 months until I got that appointment, and another estimated 6 months until then I would have a surgery date. And keep in mind that this was prior to the ruling that all trans surgeries would be fully covered by MSP. So there are less people in the system, or at least assumably less people in the system at this time. And now that there is sort of full coverage, I don't know, my doctor and I have sort of estimated that there might be a longer waiting list at this point, but it's hard to say for sure. And this is just talking BC, of course. So just keep in mind that if you are Canadian, the fact that we do have MSP and universal coverage does not mean that your transition is free, and it does not mean that sort of you write in to get surgery and then you get surgery. There is waiting and there is sort of hoops to jump through as well. I mean, but that's the same with anywhere. If you're trying to get surgery anywhere, you might require certain documentation from some surgeons. My surgeon didn't. He sort of did and he sort of didn't. He wanted to know who was overseeing my transition. I had told him Dr. Townsend, and she oversees a lot of trans patients in Vancouver, so he was familiar with that. He was like, okay, and I mean, that was the end of that with him. And of course, I was paying him privately, so he didn't really have to sort of go through the MSP channels, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, it can really be hard to estimate how much you're going to pay for transition, and it happens over a long period of time. But for me, $10,000 and still going. So question two, how did you know you were trans? I figured this out more through a process of elimination. After high school, I decided that I could no longer continue pretending or putting on that female facade because I was really aware that it was very much a facade. and I didn't know what to do because I didn't want to be trans. I didn't want to be a boy. To me, that was just at the time what that meant was that I was going to be socially outcast forever, and it was just something I did not want for myself. So I had heard about gender identities that were more in between, so I experimented with those for a long time. That was really helpful for me. Um, that's why I often suggest it to other people because I really do think that you have, in order to know who you are or what you are, or whatever, you have to know what you aren't or who you aren't. It's sort of figuring it out that way because in terms of knowing who you are and knowing everything about yourself, I don't believe that you ever really know that. I mean, there were things I didn't know about myself at 14 that I now have a better grasp on, but by no means at 22 do I know everything about myself. I can say I know everything about myself when I die and I'm no longer developing as a person, if that makes any sense. But in terms of knowing, it's also okay not to know. I was unsure for a long time, hence why I just sort of tried to drop the labels and just I dropped the labels and I said, you know what, I'm just gonna be me and see where that takes me. I sort of liken it to stop, like I was in my boat and I stopped, pumping the oars and I just sat there and I just sort of thought about myself and thought about how I felt and experienced different things because experience is so important. Things look great in theory, but in practice they can be completely different or they can just not work at all. Like a perfectly sound theory can just fall apart in practice. Um, so anyway, I just let myself sort of drift, and eventually I did really naturally arrive at the answer, and it took a great deal of time. It took years, but I'm happy that I didn't sort of jump to anything prematurely, so to speak. I'm happy that I did sort of sort through my own emotions on it because I feel that I do have. Oh, cat, hold on. She was in the wires of the screen. I feel that I do have a oh, I feel that I do have a good grasp on how I feel, and because of that, I don't have any doubt that in transitioning, like when I decided to transition, it was very much something that I did confidently, just because I'd been critical and I examined sort of all sides of it, and I was just like I made a really informed decision, and I'm happy that I did do that. And just tacking onto that, they're really like there's this concept of the true transsexual, and that you will have experience certain things, and if you have certain mannerisms, cattail, that you must be trans, or that you must be trans in, or that you must do these certain things in order to be trans or have these certain feelings. That's slowly being accepted as being completely not true because we all know that different trans people have different experiences, just like different gay people have different experiences. Lawyers, doctors, like all people have different experiences. Um, so, in terms of knowing you're trans, qualifying it by experiences alone, I would say, is kind of incomplete. Because, I mean, and this really sounds super spiritual, but it is this really innate feeling that it's something that needs to be done and that you are male, or if you're a trans woman, that you are female. And it's like I describe it as sort of like you take off everything else. You take off clothing, body, friends, lovers, family, environment. Like you just strip all that away, likes, dislikes, and what I was left with was just a name, age, and all that, and just I'm male. It was very essential. It wasn't I'm male, but I like these things. Like that doesn't really factor in because like we all know that your clothing doesn't denote your gender. Your gender denotes your gender, and it is something very intangible. So, um, just be careful in terms of saying I'm male because I like to wear male clothing. Because what clothing is cloth. Like it doesn't have a gender. we just gender in society. So, well, I guess what I'm trying to say is don't let outside forces gender you. Cattail. Only you can gender you. Um, and I guess essentially that's what I have to say. And don't let anyone tell you what gender you are or what gender you aren't. That's why if you ask me, um, am I trans, and then describe yourself, that's something I can't really answer for you. So another question is sexuality, and this is along the lines of I feel like a boy or am a boy. I'm not sure this person who was asking was F-team or not, or masculine identified. I'm not sure, but I like boys. Essentially asking, is that okay? And I actually know a lot of gay trans men. There was a post on Tumblr from recently that was from a trans man saying, I'm a gay trans man, and it seems like all the trans men I know are gay. Are there any straight trans men out there? Um, I consider myself straight. I've had lots of experience dating men, and um, it's not that they were bad guys by any stretch of the word at all. I mean, some of them were better than others, but I just did not have any sexual interest in men. I feel like when I did express sexual interest, it was always very forced, in that I was doing it for not sexual, for social acceptance. Um, that doesn't mean that I don't find men attractive, because part of me figuring out my sexuality was realizing that when I did find men attractive, it wasn't in the fact that, oh, I find you attractive, I want to be with you. It was, I find you attractive because I really admire, um, sort of generally like your body shape and all that, and I'm maybe a little bit jealous of that, and I look up to that, and that's something that strikes me as attractive. Therefore, I'd be cool if I could look like that. Whenever I see a guy with a six pack, I admire it because I'm just like, whoa. So that's what I want. um, so of course, like there are different forms of attraction, and even from someone who's straight, it doesn't mean that I suddenly have to be like, oh, you know, naked man, cover my eyes. It's like, whatever. um, and it's a different form of attraction for me. It's attraction in the form of non-sexual attraction. Um, so yeah, I mean, like, transition doesn't have anything to do with sexuality. Sometimes sexuality can change in transition, but a lot of time that's really just because a person becomes more comfortable with who they are. Therefore, their dynamics with other people in the relationships may shift because suddenly that they're able to um, exist in sort of this new. I don't want to say role, but this new. Well, they're able to express themselves better most of the time. So therefore, their relationships with other people change, and maybe their sexuality may shift. There's been some urban legend about transition turning trans guys gay, and I know a few trans guys who now do find men attractive, whereas they didn't before. There are a lot of theories about this, but it doesn't happen to everyone. It didn't happen to me. In fact, transitioning really just eliminated all perceived sexual attraction I had towards men, because before I transitioned, I would often say I was bi. Um, Now I say with utmost certainty that I am straight. I, I mean, I have thought about it critically, and I'm just like, I don't find men sexually attractive anymore. It just doesn't happen. Um, my sexual attraction towards women, on the other hand, has dramatically increased because I now feel comfortable in my body and stupid cat, and in my just in myself. So I feel like I'm able to better express my sexuality, which is straight.